The lawyer slid the papers across the kitchen island, and Connor didn't even wait for me to pick up the pen before he started talking about paint colors for the nursery. Just sign it, Adele. We don't need to make this dramatic. He had his arm around Paige, who was rubbing slow circles over a belly that, in 3 months of seeing each other, seemed awfully far along to me. Beverly, my mother-in-law, sat at the head of the table like she was presiding over a tribunal, her reading glasses pushed up into her silver hair. "It's for the best," Beverly said, not looking up from her tea. "A woman your age, no career, no skills beyond running a household. You should be grateful Connor's willing to be reasonable about the settlement." I looked down at the documents, Connor's signature, Paige's as a witness, which struck me as strange even then. Beverly's underneath. All that was left was mine. You're sure about this?" I said, not a question. My voice came out flatter than I expected, like I was confirming a dentist appointment. "I have never been more sure of anything in my life," Connor said, and there was real cruelty in how easily he smiled when he said it. 14 years, Adele. 14 years of you doing the laundry and the school pickups. And you think that's a marriage? Paige actually talks to me. Paige actually understands what I do. I picked up the pen. Behind me, I could hear my daughter Nora's sock feet on the hardwood, hovering in the hallway where she thought I couldn't see her. She was 8. She'd been told to wait upstairs. She never listened, which I'd always loved about her. I signed. "Good," Connor said, snatching the papers like he was afraid I'd change my mind. "Now get your things together. We're putting the house up next month and I'd like you gone by Friday." "My bags are already packed," I said, standing. "Nora. Come on, sweetheart." I didn't look back at any of them. Not at Connor's smug satisfaction, not at Beverly's frozen disapproval, not at Paige's hand still resting on that suspiciously confident bump. I took my daughter's hand and walked out the front door of the house I'd decorated, cleaned, and defended for 14 years, and I didn't know yet that in 11 hours we'd be 34,000 feet over Saskatchewan, and that the family celebrating behind us had no idea what was about to land on them. The rain was coming down sideways on the cab ride to Pearson, and Nora fell asleep against my shoulder somewhere around the 4:01. I watched the city lights smear past the window and thought about how I'd gotten here. Married at 26 to a man who told me, very reasonably, very lovingly at the time, that he wanted a wife who'd be home with the kids. That 2 careers in one house was a recipe for chaos. I'd been an equity research associate at a mid-size firm in downtown Toronto. I gave notice 8 months after the wedding. Beverly had never let me forget the bargain I'd made. A woman who doesn't bring in a paycheck doesn't get to have opinions about the mortgage, she liked to say, usually right after complimenting someone else's daughter-in-law's promotion. Connor was charming everywhere except inside our own walls, where he turned into someone who counted how long my showers took and corrected the way I loaded the dishwasher. 6 months ago, everything had changed pace, late nights. A new cologne. A receipt from his coat pocket when I was doing laundry. Laundry, of course, because that was still my job. Then a text lit up on his phone while it sat charging on the nightstand. "Can't wait for you to feel the baby kick this weekend." From a contact saved as P. When I confronted him, he didn't even flinch. "You found out." "Honestly, good timing. I was going to tell you anyway. I'm marrying Paige." He'd said it like he was telling me he'd switched banks. Beverly's reaction had been worse. "Well, it's about time Connor had a wife who could actually give the Miss Absasanson," she'd said, beaming like I'd handed her good news. She had never forgiven me for Nora being a girl. As if I'd had some say in the matter, I'd made my decision in the quiet after that. If I stayed, Nora would grow up watching her father parade his mistress through our kitchen, and her grandmother call her mother useless to her face. I wasn't going to let that be her childhood. What none of them knew, what I had never told a single member of that family in 14 years, was that I hadn't actually stopped working. 6 months after I quit my job, my old boss, Alistair Whitfield, had tracked me down. He'd since left to start his own investment advisory out of Vancouver, and he was not, it turned out, willing to let a good analyst go to waste over what he called a man's insecurity. He'd offered me freelance work, market research, modeling, the occasional report, done entirely from my laptop at night after Connor was asleep, paid into a TFSA and a private account he'd helped me set up under my maiden name. Connor never knew. Beverly never knew. For 14 years, the woman who couldn't hold a real job had been quietly building a 6-figure annual income and a reputation under a pseudonym as one of the sharpest small-cap analysts on Bay Street's radar, a woman with no skills. Every time Beverly said it, I'd smiled and thought of my last invoice. At the airport, I texted Mr. Whitfield. "It's done. Booking the 9:40 to Vancouver." He'd insisted, months ago when I first told him I might finally leave, that if the day ever came, I should let him handle the landing. "You focus on getting out the door, Adele. I'll handle the rest, he'd said. I hadn't fully understood what that meant until much later. We were almost at the gate when I heard my name, my actual first name, called out in that particular tone reserved for people who think they're better than you. Adele? Is that you? Connor's sister Tatum was standing at a coffee kiosk in a coat that cost more than my last car payment, an enormous Vuitton duffel at her feet. Wow. Running off in the middle of the night with a kid and a suitcase. Classy, don't you have a flight to catch, Tatum? Whistler, actually. Ski trip with the girls. Her eyes flicked over my bag. Where exactly are you going? And with what money, may I ask? Connor canceled the joint cards an hour ago. Mom told me. She thought you should know before you got somewhere and found out the embarrassing way. I felt my stomach drop, but I kept my face still. That's between Connor and me. It's actually between you and reality, Tatum said, with the particular delight of someone delivering bad news she's been saving up. You haven't worked in 14 years. You're going to be broke in a month, and you'll be calling my brother begging for money, and he's not going to answer. Good luck out there, Mom. She said the last part to Nora with mock sweetness, then sauntered off toward her gate. Nora's hand tightened in mine. Mommy, are we going to be okay? We are going to be more than okay, I told her. And for the first time that night, I let myself believe it. I had the offshore account information saved on my phone. I had Mr. Whitfield's number. What I didn't yet know was that Connor, in his fury, had done more damage than just the joint cards. We landed in Vancouver a little after midnight local time, into a fine, miserable West Coast drizzle. I'd booked us into a boutique hotel downtown, paid for, I thought, on the personal visa I kept in my own name, separate from anything Connor could touch. I was wrong. I'm sorry, ma'am, this card has been declined, the night clerk said, not unkindly, after running it twice. That can't be right. Try the other one. Same result. I tried the ATM in the lobby with my debit card, declined again. My phone, once it found the hotel Wi-Fi, exploded with notifications. A text from Connor. Did you really think you could run off on my dime? I had every card with your name on it frozen this afternoon, including the personal one, since technically it was opened under my employee banking package. Hope London. Sorry, Vancouver is nice this time of year. A voicemail from Beverly, her voice pitched somewhere between triumph and disgust. I hope you enjoy what you've earned, dragging that poor child halfway across the country on a whim. Don't you dare call this family for help. What I hadn't accounted for was that the private account Connor had opened years ago to manage household expenses, the one I'd quietly used as a backup, had technically been tied to his employee banking program the whole time. My real money, the money I'd actually earned, was sitting safely in an account with Mr. Whitfield's firm, but that account required in-person identity verification to access for the first time, something I hadn't anticipated needing to do at midnight in a foreign city with a crying 8-year-old. I had $400 in cash in my wallet and nothing else. I'm very sorry, but without a valid form of payment, I can't issue the room, the clerk said. The kindness in his voice somehow made it worse. We were back out on the street within 10 minutes, the rain soaking through my coat. Nora's teeth were chattering. Mommy, I'm cold and my feet hurt. A woman with no skills can't possibly survive on her own. Connor's voice in my head. Beverly's, Tatum's. For one terrible minute, standing on a wet sidewalk with my daughter shaking against my side, I believed them. I thought about turning around, calling Connor, begging. That was when a black sedan slid to the curb in front of us, and a man stepped out from the back seat holding an umbrella, the rain bouncing off his shoulders. Adele Caro, he said. I'm so sorry we're late. Mr. Whitfield sent me the moment he heard your flight had landed. Your hotel confirmation must have come through with an error on our end. Please, let's get your daughter out of the cold. His name was Edmund Hollis, Mr. Whitfield's executive assistant and right hand, and within minutes Nora was wrapped in his wool coat in the warm back seat of the car, finally, still. Mr. Whitfield asked me to extend his deepest apologies for the confusion tonight. Hollis, once we were moving. He had no idea your husband would go so far as to freeze every account with your name attached. We should have anticipated it. How did you even know which hotel? Mr. Whitfield booked it himself. He's been planning your transition for months, ever since you mentioned the divorce might finally happen. Hollis smiled, almost apologetic. He's quite protective of his best analyst. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 14 years. Not Connor. Not Beverly. Nobody in that family had the faintest idea that Caro, my maiden name, the one on my private account, the one on every report I'd ever filed, belonged to the same useless housewife they'd just thrown out into the rain. There's something else, Hollis said, tapping his tablet. Mr. Whitfield asked me to look into your husband's firm. There have been irregularities in some of the accounts he manages. Fund transfers that don't reconcile. We started looking before you even left. Connor's involved in something? We believe so. Embezzlement. possibly through a network of shell investments. If it's confirmed, this won't just cost him his job. I stared out the window at the lights of the city sliding by. And Paige? Hollis hesitated. We ran a standard background check, given the circumstances. There's a name attached to her that came up more than once. A man named Reggie Doyle. He has a history. Several histories, actually, under several names. He looked at me carefully. Miss Caro, are you certain the timeline of her pregnancies adds up the way your husband believes it does? A cold feeling moved through me, the same unease I'd felt on the plane watching the city lights disappear behind us. I don't know, but I have a feeling we're about to find out. The car pulled up to a brick townhouse in Kitsilano, all glass and warm light, a nanny already waiting at the door. A kind-faced woman named Priya whom Mr. Whitfield had hired weeks earlier just in case, Hollis explained, so that Nora would never be without someone the moment I needed to work. That detail mattered to me more than almost anything else that night. I would not be the kind of mother who left her daughter to fend for herself. I'd seen too many comments online about women in stories like mine doing exactly that, and I was determined not to be one of them. This is yours for now, Hollis said. Get some rest. Mr. Whitfield would like to see you at the office tomorrow at 10. As Ms. Caro, senior analyst, if you're ready. I tucked Nora into a soft bed, told her we were safe, and watched her fall asleep almost instantly, the way only a child who trusts completely can. Then I sat by the window for a long time, looking out at a city I'd never lived in, and let myself feel, for the first time in months, something close to hope. The next morning, Mr. Whitfield's office took up the top 2 floors of a glass tower on West Georgia. He stood when I walked in, a tall man in his 60s with the quiet authority that never needed to raise its voice. Adil, it's good to finally see you somewhere other than a spreadsheet. He gestured to a chair. Your husband called you a woman with no skills, I understand. I always thought it was criminal, keeping one of the sharpest minds I've ever worked with locked in a kitchen in Etobicoke. Thank you, Mr. Whitfield, for everything. Don't thank me yet. There's work to do. He slid a tablet across the desk. Your husband's firm flagged irregular transfers 8 months ago. Small enough to bury, large enough that someone should have caught them. We've traced roughly $2 million routed through 3 numbered companies registered in the Caymans. The trail goes cold there. I need you to find where it actually lands. I looked at the screen, at the tangle of transaction IDs and shell entities, and felt something settle into place inside me. The particular calm I always felt when a problem made sense for the first time. To anyone else, it would have looked like noise. To me, it was a pattern waiting to be named. I worked through the morning without looking up once. By early afternoon, I had it. Here, I said, turning the tablet toward Hollis and Mr. Whitfield. All 3 shell companies funnel into a single numbered account out of a private bank in Nassau. The signing authority on that account belongs to a Reginald Doyle. Hollis's eyebrows went up. The same name from Paige's background check. The same name, I confirmed. Connor isn't running a side investment scheme, he's being run. Whoever this Doyle is, he's been using Connor as an unwitting and using Paige, and the pregnancy, to keep him compliant and distracted while the money moved. Mr. Whitfield exhaled slowly. A brilliant, foolish man, your ex-husband. Send this to the firm's audit committee today. And Adele, Connor's company is a client of this fund. We hold a controlling interest. I think it's time the board understood exactly what kind of analyst they've been underestimating. That same afternoon, 3,000 kilometers away, Connor sat in his corner office watching his career end in real time. Get me legal. Now, he barked at his assistant, sweat beading at his temples as 2 compliance officers laid printouts across his desk. The same trail I'd just uncovered, formatted into a report so clean even a first-year associate could follow it. Mr. Hale, these transfers all carry your authorization codes, one of the officers said. Over $2 million. Routed through entities with no legitimate business purpose, ending in an account controlled by a man currently under investigation by the RCMP's Financial Crimes Unit. That's impossible. I never authorize. Your logging credentials don't agree with you. The officer slid another page across. This report was submitted this meeting by senior leadership at our parent fund. Whoever compiled it knew exactly where to look. Who? Connor's voice cracked. Who put this together? The officer checked the cover sheet. Analyst of record. A. Caro. Connor went very still. That can't be. That's a coincidence. Caro is a common. It's not a common names in this file. The lead investor on this audit is the majority shareholder of this firm. They appointed her personally. At the same moment, in an obstetrics clinic on Robson Street, Beverly sat in the waiting room beaming at strangers, telling anyone who'd listen that her son's new partner was finally, at 22 weeks, about to confirm they were having a boy. 22 weeks, the doctor repeated, frowning at the ultrasound screen, then at Paige's chart. Ms. Reyes, are you certain about your dates? Based on fetal measurements, you're closer to 24 weeks gestation than the 12 you reported on intake. That's not possible, Paige said, her voice climbing. We've only been together since this low spring. The doctor flipped back a page. You were also seen at this clinic 2 months ago. Your intake form at that visit listed a different partner, a Mr. Doyle, identified as your husband. She looked up. Is there something you'd like to clarify? The room went silent except for the soft electronic whoosh of the heartbeat monitor. Beverly's face drained of color. What is she talking about, Connor? Connor's not even here. What husband? Connor's phone began ringing before anyone could answer. He stepped into the hallway to take it, his career and his marriage collapsing in 2 separate rooms at the exact same moment. By the time I called Hollis that evening to confirm the report had been received, the story had already started to unravel on its own, the way these things do, once the first thread comes loose. Connor was placed on administrative leave within the hour, escorted out of the building by security while his colleagues pretended not to watch. Paige, abandoned at the clinic by a family that no longer wanted to claim her, called the only person she had left to call. Reggie Doyle. She found him 3 days later at a serviced apartment in Yorkville, in the middle of liquidating whatever he could carry. You said you loved me, she said when he opened the door. I said a lot of things, Doyle replied, not even glancing up from the duffel bag he was packing. Some analyst out west cracked the whole operation. My accounts are frozen, my passport's flagged, and you're standing here asking about feelings. Get out of my way. What about the baby? It's yours. He laughed, short and ugly. I had a vasectomy 6 years ago, sweetheart. Whatever's in there, it isn't mine. And it sure as hell isn't Connor Hale's either, unless he's got better math skills than I gave him credit for. He shoved past her and was gone before she could find the words to respond, leaving her alone in a half-packed apartment with nowhere to go. I learned all of this secondhand, through Hollis's updates, delivered in his careful, understated way, like a man reading me the weather. I felt oddly, very little. Not triumph, not pity. Just the quiet satisfaction of watching a structure built on lies finally collapse under its own weight. 2 weeks later, the funds board confirmed what Mr. Whitfield had been planning for months. With controlling interest in Connor's former firm and a fraud scandal demanding new leadership, they were installing me as interim president of the Toronto office, effective immediately. I flew back into Pearson, the same airport I'd fled from in the rain, in a tailored navy suit, with Hollis and 2 of the fund's senior counsel beside me, and Nora safely back in Vancouver with Priya for the week, video calling me every night to tell me about her new friends at school. The creditors' meeting was held in the same boardroom where Connor had once dreamed of making partner. Beverly was there, in a coat I recognized from better days, now slightly out of season. Tatum sat beside her, visibly thinner with stress, her phone buzzing uselessly with declined payment alerts she kept silencing. Gordon, my former father-in-law, looked like he'd aged a decade in a month. Connor sat at the end of the table in a wrinkled shirt, hands cuffed loosely beneath the table, 2 officers stationed at the door. You're joking, Beverly said, when I walked in and took the seat at the head of the table. This is absurd. You running this firm? Madam Caro, counsel said, addressing me with the formality the room clearly hadn't expected, is the firm's controlling shareholders appointed president, and as of this audit, the principal creditor on the $11 million in restitution and damages owed by Hale's misconduct. 11 million, Connor repeated numbly. There's no way I can ever. In Canada, debts arising from fraud are not dischargeable through bankruptcy, counsel continued. You will be working the rest of your life to pay this down, Mr. Hale, regardless of any future filing. I let the silence sit for a moment before I spoke, because I'd learned, in 14 years of being talked over, exactly how much power there is in choosing not to fill a silence. I'm not here to ruin your lives, I said finally, looking at each of them in turn. You did that yourselves. Connor, with $2 million of stolen money and a stranger's child he was so eager to claim as his own. Beverly, with 14 years of telling a woman who supported nothing to offer it. I'm only here to settle accounts. Please, Connor said, his composure finally cracking. We were married. Doesn't that count for something? It used to, I said. Then you put divorce papers in front of me with your mistress standing beside you, and told me I should be grateful for the privilege. I am simply giving you the same courtesy you gave me. No more, no less. The officers came for him at exactly 4 o'clock. Beverly fainted into Gordon's arms when counsel confirmed the house. Her house, the one she'd lorded over me in for 14 years, was being seized as part of restitution. Tatum sat frozen, mascara running, staring at a single decline charge notification on her phone like it might still somehow be a mistake. I didn't watch them carried out. I had a flight to catch. 6 weeks later, the city had finally turned warm. I picked Nora up from school in Kitsilano, her backpack twice her size, chattering about a science project on tide pools before I'd even gotten the car door shut. "Mommy, are you happy now?" she asked, out of nowhere, somewhere on the drive home. The way kids ask the questions that actually matter without any warning at all. I thought about the version of myself that had stood crying in the Vancouver rain 4 months ago, believing every cruel thing that family had ever said about her. I thought about Beverly's voice in my head, a woman with no skills, and how long I'd let it live there rent-free. "I am," I said, and meant it completely. "I really am." "Me too," Nora said, satisfied, already moving on to whether we could get takeout from the place with the good dumplings. I caught her eye in the rearview mirror and she grinned at me, gap-toothed and entirely unbothered, the way only a child who finally feels safe can be. Outside, the late afternoon sun was breaking through the clouds over the mountains, gold and ordinary and completely mine. I had spent 14 years being told I had nothing to offer anyone. It turned out I'd had everything I needed the entire time. I'd just been waiting for someone to ask the right question, and for the courage to answer it for myself.